Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over a storm in the northwest. It will bring in some rain for the lower elevations with some snow in parts of the Rockies and the higher elevations. Overall, this is going to be a fairly minor event in the grand scheme of things, probably just bringing about 2 inches of rain and up to a foot or so of snow for a lot of areas, but I still do want to cover it. There's not a lot going on weather-wise today, so this is really the only other big story besides the cold in the east, which I've already covered. Before we get into it, I do just want to say that I do have a bit of a sore throat, so sorry if that does come through on the video. I think probably by tomorrow or maybe the day after, it should be all good with. But at least for today, I think it'll probably last for a few more hours. So let's get into it, and let's start off with your weather photo of the day. This one was sent in by Elizabeth, who lives in north central Kentucky, just showing in some fall foliage off her farm, and you can see that we do have some of those yellows and oranges popping up. You can also see some of the clouds in the background, which does make it a little bit more of an interesting photo, because you do have a bit of a change in lighting from the back to the front. So overall, a really great photo sent in by Elizabeth. If you guys want to send in your photos, go over to elitheweatherguyyt at gmail.com, and that's also in the description down below. And I'll probably feature your photos in the beginning of the video. So that's always a great way to get yourself on the channel. And if you guys ever have any cool weather photos, I know we had one sent in of the snowstorm which happened recently in Nebraska. And if you have any current weather event photos that you want to send in, feel free to do so. And even if you have any cool photos from the past, or even if it's not really a storm, but let's just say some foliage, some clouds, sunset, sunrise, anything like that, you can send them over, and I'll probably feature it in the video. So let's get into it, and let's start off with the watches and warnings for right now. You can see that we do have some wind advisories into the west, as well as some freeze warnings in parts of Oklahoma, Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee, Kentucky, and actually not Kentucky, but for westernmost Virginia. And then we have another area for parts of North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, probably DC, although I'm not 100% sure, and then also into Delaware and southernmost New Jersey. And then we have some frost advisories for a little bit of Maryland, Delaware, actually not even Delaware, just Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, as well as for Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and even a little bit of northeastern Texas. And if you're wondering, the areas to the north of this frost and freeze warning area will still get a frost and a freeze most likely, although it's the end of the growing season. So after your first freeze, or your first below 32-degree temperature, or after a certain date. So for example, some areas their growing season ends on October 15th, some areas it ends on October 1st, other areas it ends November 15th. Really depends on where in the country you are. But whenever your growing season ends, you will no longer receive any more frost advisories or freeze watches or freeze warnings. And also, for some of these areas, let's say in the Ohio Valley, the Northeast, who still, their growing season, I think, is still going on, maybe for another few days, but they've already seen their first below 32-degree temperature, meaning that they will no longer receive any more freeze warnings or frost advisories. So, if you live to the north of this area and you're wondering, well, why is, let's say, northern Arkansas seeing a freeze warning, but me in central Missouri, I'm not seeing a freeze warning? Why is that happening, even though we're expecting to be below freezing? That's going to be the reason why. It's just because your growing season has already ended. So they only put it up for the areas that still are in the midst of their growing season. Although for most areas, I would say bring in your plants at least over the next couple of days, because maybe just put a tarp over them, or find some way to protect them, because it is going to start to get a lot colder. Now, in terms of the extremes, yesterday we got up to 94 in Thermal, California, Ocotillo Wells, California, and in Mecca, California. Again, all of them getting up to 94 degrees Fahrenheit. The low temperature was 11 degrees in Nakusa, Wisconsin, where they got, again, down to 11 degrees. And then the highest rainfall report was in Trenton, Texas, where they got 2.55 inches of rain. The highest snowfall report was 3 miles northwest of Casuno Lake, Michigan, That's in the UP of Michigan, where they got 14 inches of lake effect snowfall yesterday. So that was definitely an eventful lake effect event, which we actually did cover on the channel just a few days ago. Now let's get started with the actual forecast. Let's talk about the storm in the northwest. It's going to be mostly a rain event for many, but if you are planning on driving through some of the Cascades, if you're going on some of those mountain passes, potentially trying to cross over into eastern Washington, or vice versa, if you're going from eastern Washington to western Washington, you might have some issues. So I would definitely try and plan some routes around some of the more troubled roads where you would have a lot more snow. So probably try and take some sort of a route further to the south, maybe going through even Oregon, and then looping back up, because some of these mountain roads will probably be a little bit on the bad side. I would say, unless you're taking one of the big interstates, I would definitely stay off of any roads that go higher up in elevation, especially in Washington or western Oregon, because they will definitely be a mess. So unless you're going along maybe I-90, I-80, anything like that, I would say definitely try and stay off of these areas and try and get away from any of these higher elevation mountain roads. Now, this would be by Friday evening, and you can see that we were looking at some rain and snow still for the northwest. This is going to come in multiple different waves. So we're going to have your first wave move in for Friday evening. Second wave is going to come in by Saturday morning, and they're going to continue to roll through. So it's not going to be all just one big system, but they will accumulate, and you really won't notice that they're two different systems unless you're looking at radar. So for the average person who's not into the weather, who's not really paying too much attention, you'll probably think that this is just one huge massive system, when in reality this is probably 3 or 4 smaller systems spread out over the course of 3 or 4 days. So you can see the precipitation not going to be super heavy. Again, try and watch out if you're going to be passing through any highly elevated roads in eastern Oregon, northern Idaho, western Montana. So these areas will be a little bit more of a mess, but the rain will probably dominate over a lot of these areas. You're actually going to be a couple degrees above the average in terms of temperatures, so it will not be as snowy as some previous events. Moving this on, you can see that we have by Saturday, it does start to cool down. So now some of these areas that once were in more of the rain column, especially for northern Washington, are going to start to get in on some snow. These are still high elevation regions, but not as high elevation. So by this point, it is becoming a little bit more of a mess over some of these mountain pass roads. So if you're trying to cross over any of these areas, it will be a little bit more hectic. So you're definitely going to want to check. I know there are some traffic websites or apps that do let you know the traffic congestion. I would definitely check that out before. If you see a road that's really clogged up, that has those red bars or orange bars on the roads, probably avoid that, because that's probably indicating that you either have a crash on that road because of the snow, or that it might actually be shut down. So at least pay attention to the radio, pay attention to your local news, because they'll probably tell you if there's any big major closings on any of these roads, if you are going to be passing through any of them. For the rest of you guys who live not in the higher elevations, it is still going to be a rain event. We're looking at about 2 to 4 inches once we're all said and done with this. This would be by Saturday night. Again, here's the second wave. So the first wave already moved through. Here's the second wave. Here's the third wave of moisture, which is now into the northwest. So again, this is a tiered system. We're not dealing with just one huge mess of a storm moving into the northwest. This is going to be an organized type of event with multiple different waves. Now, moving this on to Sunday evening, and you can start to see that we still do have some of that rain to a lesser extent in the northwest, and it is definitely getting a little bit chillier into these areas by Sunday and Monday. So here's the total snowfall map for this event. You can see that we're looking at some of the Cascades getting up near maybe 2 feet of snowfall, and even 3 to 4 feet in some of the highest spots. If you get into the Rockies, we're looking at a good 6 to 12 inches over a good amount of that area. And then you get into some of these lower elevation mountain regions. So for example, the Ruby Mountains in Nevada, the Sierra Nevadas in California, eastern Oregon. These areas areas aren't going to be dealing with as much snowfall, but you will still probably get 2 to 4 inches plus in most of those spots. So we will be dealing with some amount of snow. Again, the major areas, the I-5 corridor, the areas of eastern Washington and eastern Oregon, the big population spots over these couple of states, so over Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, will start to clear out. You're not going to have too much snow into these areas, so really the big population centers are not going to have too much snow, but you get a little bit further out, and you'll definitely have snow. So that could definitely be an issue, especially if any of you guys live in those spots where you will have to shovel away probably a couple inches of snowfall. And if we look at the rainfall, which I think will be a bigger threat for a lot of areas, you can see that we're looking at about 2 to 3 inches of lower elevation rainfall. You get east of the Cascades, into kind of that mountain shadow effect, and you start to see, or the rain shadow effect, where you start to see in eastern Oregon, eastern Washington, maybe just half an inch or less of rainfall. And that's because, again, you're getting all that moisture onto the west coast, and then once it goes over the Cascades, it kind of gets blocked out. So all that rain starts and kind of pushes its way onto the Cascades, but not much of that can actually make its way east of there. So these areas to the east, which actually need some more rainfall, are not going to be able to get it. They're only going to get maybe a 1/4 inch to 3/4 of an inch at best in most of these spots. And if we look at the total wind gusts, the highest wind gusts during this event in miles per hour, or actually this is in knots, you can see that we're looking at about 30 to 40 knots, which is equivalent to about 35 to 45 miles per hour. So it's not going to be incredibly windy, although you get up into, again, some of the mountains. Of course, it will be windy up there. You get into some of the beach spots along western Oregon and western Washington. It will be quite windy over there. But again, you get inland and it will be more of a breezy event. You're not going to be dealing with anything that's going to be awfully windy, but it will still be noticeable and something that you want to at least pay attention to. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Again, this is going to be a little bit of a shorter video just because we don't have a lot to cover. We only have really this one system, and then we have the cold and snow, or not really snow, but just cold in the east, which we already made 2 videos in a row about. And so I don't want to really kind of keep beating down on that one topic, just because I want to have a little bit more diversity on the channel in terms of the topics we actually cover. I don't want to just be covering one part of the country, because then the other part of the country, again, has no videos on it. So I want to kind of spread around the videos and make sure that I cover each corner of the country. So if I spend too much time on the east, then you'll probably see me make another video on the west and just kind of mix it up, so that a wider swath of the country actually has a video covering their area and on a topic related to their area. So again, that is going to wrap it up. If you have any questions or comments, just leave them down below, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Goodbye.